Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Hadir. Get your notebooks ready. In this lesson, we're going to complete our story, Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte. Let's start summarizing the previous events. Jane was an orphan girl in early 19th century Britain. Jane knew Mr. Rochester's secret. She found out that the terrible woman she saw in her room with cruel laugh and set fire to Mr. Rochester's room was his wife. Her name is Bertha. She's mad, and Grace Poole looks after her. Jane felt sorry for him, but she decided not to stay at home. Sadly, she put a few ordinary clothes into a small case and took a little money. She quietly left Thornfield in the morning, and nobody saw her leave. Jane wanted to travel as far as she could from Thornfield. She spent all her money. She traveled for 2 days and 2 nights. She became very tired and very hungry. At last she arrived at a place where there were no towns or villages and very few houses. She saw a house and looked through the window. She knocked on the door. A servant opened it. "Who are you? What do you want?" the servant asked. "I'm a stranger. I haven't any money or food. I'm tired and hungry. Please help me," Jane said. The servant left her and came back with a piece of bread. She asked Jane to leave and not to stay here, but Jane was too tired to move. Jane thought, "Nobody will help me. I will die." Someone was listening and watching Jane. He was a tall young man. He asked the servant Hannah about her and about her name. Then he took her into the house. The room was warm, and the two young women came to talk to Jane. "What's your name?" they asked. "My name is Jane Elliott," Jane said. She didn't want anyone to know her name, and didn't want Mr. Rochester to find her. She wanted a new start. They gave her some food and took her to a bedroom to sleep, where Jane slept for a long time. After a few days, Jane was able to talk to her new friends. Their names were Diana and Mary Rivers. The man was their brother St. John Rivers. He was a clergyman. He was a very handsome young man with fair hair and blue eyes. He was always serious. He was planning to go to India to work. A month later, Diana and Mary left their home to work as teachers in the south of England. St. John asked Jane to teach the poor children who lived near his church. Jane enjoyed her work. She lived in a small house near the school. In her free time, she read and painted pictures. One evening, St. John visited her. When she was finishing a painting, without saying anything, he tore a piece of paper off the bottom of the painting and put it carefully in his pocket. Then suddenly he left. The next day he visited Jane again. He was wet and cold. Jane asked him if there was any bad news. "Don't worry, my sisters are both well," he said. He thought for a long time. At last he spoke. "I know your story. I know about Mrs. Reed. I know about Lowood School, and I know about Thornfield Hall, and about Mr. Rochester and his wife. And now I know why you came here without any money. Mr. Rochester must be a bad man," St. John said. "Oh, no, he isn't," Jane said. He told her, "I have had a letter from a man in London called Mr. Briggs. He asked about you, and I knew your real name from the piece of paper I took from your painting. Your real name was on it. Mr. Briggs does not know anything about Mr. Rochester. He wrote to me about your uncle, Mr. Eyre, from Madeira. Your uncle is dead, and he left you all his money. You rich young woman. Mr. Briggs sent the letter to me, as Mr. Eyre was our uncle too. He was your mother's brother." Jane was happy to have money, and even happier to have three cousins, but she was still thinking about Mr. Rochester every day. How do these things change Jane's life? Jane's real name on her painting, Mr. Briggs' letter to Sam Jones. Prepare your answers in a notebook and be ready for our next video to complete the story.